Welcome back to Vote 17. My name is Anya Gipp, and this is a student-produced election series interviewing politicians every week in the lead up to the election. We want to talk about the issues that matter to you, so to get involved, send your questions through to the Vote 17 Facebook page. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jess Bell.
Hi everyone. We are delighted today to have Jacqui Dean, National MP for the Waitaki District and current Minister. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. So we want to start off by talking about last night's poll, the Colma-Brunton poll that came out, and it had Labour up by 6 percentage points at 43 and National down by 3 points at 41. What do you think are the reasons behind this, and do you think National are able to come back in the 3-4 weeks before the election?
Short answer is Labour have got a new leader, and Jacinda Ardern is a very appealing character. I know her well. I've worked with her across a number of years. I think the benefit of that poll for all of us and for all New Zealanders is that it shows that we are really engaged in this election, and that can only be good. I think what it's also done is given New Zealanders a clear choice between two political parties with two different values and two different sets of policies, and I'm rather hoping you'll ask me more questions about that.
Absolutely. So we want to talk a little bit more about you personally before. So you've been the MP for Waitaki for multiple election periods now, winning by substantial majorities. And so what do you attribute this to?
I'm very hardworking. I know what I stand for. I think I'm a good communicator. When I say I do something, I carry it out. I absolutely do my best for individuals, but also for the community. And I know very clearly that I stand for a political party that has got the interests of all New Zealanders, and so I find it really easy to do my job.
Awesome. So being from the Waitaki electorate, it's quite a rural, one of the most rural electorates, and National just released a $270 million ultra-fast broadband scheme for rural households and businesses. So what implications do you think this will have on small businesses and New Zealand's economy as a total?
What New Zealand small business has to do is grasp the opportunity that ultra-fast broadband is bringing, and small business is not just retail, it is innovation in people's garages, which might in turn lead to exporting, because it does. We're a very innovative corner of New Zealand, but it also means that agribusiness now has the opportunity to reach directly out to its market. I can't underestimate the value that ultra-fast broadband rollout has meant for New Zealand, both rural and urban, in terms of getting digitally competent, because it's only by doing that and reaching out to overseas markets, new ideas, innovations, that we are going to continue to foot it on the world stage. So 1 to 10, it's huge. I'd give it a 10.
Great. So talking about the environment now, you're a member of National's Blue-Green Environmental Subcommittee. What do you see as the most important or pressing issue that New Zealand faces in terms of the environment?
It's got to be water. And I said that back in 2005 in my maiden speech to Parliament. And the way I expressed it back then was water, how we use it, and how it is regarded in New Zealand. And I'm very mindful that the farming community at the moment seems to be the target for all the ills that we have with water. Now, I don't believe the science backs that up. In fact, it doesn't. So in terms of water quality, that is an issue that we all have to face in New Zealand. We shouldn't single out irrigators as being the prime polluters of water. We shouldn't single out agriculture as being the reason for poor water quality levels in New Zealand, and that varies across New Zealand, because plenty of leachates come out of the urban environment. I believe at the moment we've got a political environment of pointing the finger. It's your fault, you're doing it, you're doing it. Actually, I believe we should be addressing it as a country together, and I don't think some of the current policies floated by some of the political parties are helpful in that regard. And I think the fact that we are now beginning increasingly to talk about a rural-urban divide is regrettable, and I don't think it should be that way. So the blue-green team, of which I'm proudly a part, is absolutely committed to protecting the environment while allowing economic activity. And yes, absolutely, farming has its part to play in that. Regional councils, in fact, play a pretty strong role. I was just reading some homework for today, and Otago Regional Council has brought prosecutions about poor on-farm practice. Now, they should be doing that, and the agricultural community should be rising to meet that challenge, because if they don't, they'll lose the social licence to operate, and we will have even more of that rural-urban divide. So it's got to be water, and we've all got our part to play in it.
So can you be any more specific on the policies that you say other parties have that are inadequate? And if National gets back into government, what will you be doing about the issue of water quality?
Yeah, we won't be imposing a water tax on irrigating farmers.
Why do you believe this is the way to go?
Well, I believe it's not the way to go, because Labor are proposing a water tax on the commercial use of water. And it might have sounded like a great idea to put a tax on water bottlers, and so that was the genesis of their policy. Trouble is with policy that is not well thought out is that you've got to start working through the implications of it. So I'll just run you through some of the implications for irrigators. Now, David Parker is saying, we'll charge you either 1 cent or 2 cents per cubic of water. Now, farmers go out immediately, they know how much water they're consented to use, and I've got farmers coming to me saying, this is going to cost me $45,000 more in taxation a year. Now, if you think about, and some guy came up and said that's going to cost me $38,000, these are just small holdings. These are small farmers who've got a bit of irrigation. So if you think about the orchardist in Cromwell who gave me his figure of 38,000, what is left of his income? Well, actually, not much after taxation and costs. So what's the downstream impact on that on Cromwell? Well, he won't be going out and drinking coffee, and he won't be going to dinner. He won't be going to the rural supply store and buying so much. So there is an on-flowing cost onto the rural economies. We shouldn't underestimate the ongoing impacts of putting a tax on water, because what's next? Okay, you ascribe ownership to water by way of putting a tax and a royalty on it. The moment you subscribe ownership to water, it opens us up to a whole lot of conversations that I don't think we particularly want or should have in New Zealand about who owns a renewable resource. So I think it is a bad policy. I know that farmers are very concerned about it, and I am concerned about it, not just because of the impact on individual primary producers. Also, the cost of food has got to go up. If you put inputs and costs around production, then you're going to get inputs and costs around the cost of food. And so I think it is a policy which is well-meaning. I don't think it's been well thought through, and I think it could be devastating for small communities as farmers essentially turn off the tap with irrigation and we go back to the days of having droughts. And I don't think we want to do that in New Zealand.
So if not a water tax, how does National propose to protect our waterways? We
do it already. We put significant investment into maintaining and enhancing water quality. We were the first government that put a national policy statement for fresh water. That was a very strong direction from government that we want to have achievable standards for fresh water in New Zealand. Prior to us coming in 2008, there was no policy framework for water quality. So we have regional councils who are developing water plans. That's not easy for farmers, actually. I get a lot of pushback from farmers around the constraints that they now have on water use. And my message to them is, well, you want to maintain your social licence for farming, you have got to up your game in terms of on-farm practice and water quality. Now, it's not easy. Farmers are seeing restraints on water use, and what they are seeing is restraints on their profitability and their land value. Well, you know, I'm afraid if we are going to have improving water quality, then there are going to have to be changes in agriculture. So that's one thing we're doing. In terms of water restoration, we are investing hugely in different projects around New Zealand. Rotorua lakes are really badly polluted over a number of years. Lake Taupo's under threat, but closer to home, Lake Wakatipu and Lake Wanaka are faced with some pretty invasive weeds. They've got lagrosiphon, they've got lake snow. So we are investing in science, but we're also investing in funding community groups so that they can do a lot of work in terms of the science, but also getting around how do we practically clear lagrosiphon out of Lake Wanaka, and if we do that, how do we then attack it further down the stream? So there's a lot of work going on.
Okay, great. So the environment is obviously one of the major issues concerning youth, especially in this election.
Yeah.
But you'll also be aware that as Minister for Small Business, of course, tourism is one of New Zealand's biggest industries. So how do we effectively balance tourism and environmentalism to both protect the environment and maintain this tourism industry?
And that is the key and critical question for the future of tourism and for the future of agriculture in New Zealand. So we do trade on our aspirational, clean green image, and that is why people from Korea and China and Taiwan come to New Zealand, because they can see the stars, they can take photos of the sheep and have just a wonderful experience. So I think we are all agreed we have to maintain that. In terms of tourism, we've got to make it possible for visitors to do the right thing in New Zealand in terms of our environment. And that is why we just announced changes to the freedom camping regime. So we are going to change the legislation so that freedom camping rules are consistent across New Zealand. At the moment, every council can have different rules. Not working, because tourists don't know where they stand. So we need to bring consistency. We need to have a strong rule where if you want a freedom camp and you're not self-contained, so you don't have a toilet, you must be within 200 metres of a toilet facility, otherwise it's illegal to camp there. And the other thing we're doing is we are placing the infringement fine on the vehicle. So if you've got a rental vehicle, you can't walk away from that infringement fine. We're also going to make further developments to an app. Everybody uses apps, all tourists use apps, so that they know exactly where they stand, what their environmental responsibilities are, and so they can do the right thing. We're also investing heavily in visiting drivers, because our roads are challenging, particularly down here in the south. You know, I go over the Linda's Pass, I go through the Pig Route, I go around Lake Pukaki. The driving is very difficult, so we're investing in things like more arrows on the road, more safety barriers, but more importantly, more information when people are booking their tickets to come to New Zealand about, you know, it's a beautiful place, want to have you, but we also want to keep you safe. So we're doing a lot of investment around that. And finally, my final comment is we've got to get the funding mechanism and model right for tourism. We need tourists in New Zealand, and we want them, and we want them to feel welcome. But up until now, very recently, we have said to local authorities, it's your problem. You fund the public toilets, and local authorities have said it's not affordable anymore. You know, this is a shared responsibility. So we're now recognising that, and we have put $138 million into tourism funding. So that's for safe pull-off areas around Lake Pukaki, parking areas, camping areas, public toilets most particularly, and we also allocated, I think, $46,000 to Department of Conservation so that they could enhance their facilities as well. Long answer, I know, but it's a big question.
I was just wondering if I could ask something. So you talked a lot about these tourists coming to New Zealand and things like that, and over the last kind of couple of days, Al Jazeera released a documentary outlining New Zealand's essentially showing how New Zealand's waterways aren't as clear, and essentially we're broadcasting ourselves as something that we're not. So do you think that that could impact New Zealand tourism? And do you think that that's going to make us move faster in terms of clearing our waterways and making sure they're safe again?
Absolutely. Negative publicity, of course, is very counterproductive to us. We all want to maintain good waterways, and I go back to my comment around the urban-rural divide, which is being talked about in the context of a water tax. It's the last thing we need in New Zealand. We all need to be working in the same direction so that we don't have stories like that. Whether they are accurate enough or not is almost beside the point, because it's the perception that we need to make sure we are on top of it. And frankly, we are making good progress in terms of water quality.
So, National's also proposing to make or to double the fees for tourists to experience walking tracks in New Zealand. New Zealand is, of course, obviously very isolated and quite an expensive country to come to as it is. Will this not make it even more expensive and potentially put tourists off?
I think that what will put tourists off is for a visitor tax at the border, because that's non-discriminatory. So it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're popping over the Tasman to go skiing for the weekend and enjoy the delights of Queenstown, or whether you're coming on the trip of a lifetime from India with your extended family, then it's non-discriminatory at the border, and it becomes another barrier for people making the big decision to fly long haul. The doubling of the fees for overseas tourists to enjoy our great walks is a very targeted approach to that. People are well used to forking out to go and visit, experience visitor attractions around the world, around Europe. You're always reaching in your pocket for this experience. So rather than doing a blanket tax, which hits everybody, we're saying, okay, enjoy our great walks, enjoy our wonderful huts and the facilities, but it's going to cost you to do it.
So we're going to change the topic of conversation to a little bit more Dunedin focused. So National announced for the Dunedin Hospital that it would take about 7 to 10 years when Jonathan Coleman announced it. So Labor said they would do it in their first term. Do you think it's going to, the 7 to 10 years is too long, considering surgeries are already being postponed because of rain?
We're looking at a project from start to finish. So 7 years means you don't start 6 years and 6 months out and go, gee, I hope we're finished in 6 months' time. It's a massive project, it's a massive rebuild. We're going to have to maintain health services the whole time the rebuild is going on. So it's a massive logistical exercise. We've got, first and foremost, we need to maintain and improve good health care for our region. And it's not just Dunedin people, it's my people in the regions as well. Plug in for Maniatoto and Oamaru and Clyde hospitals right there. So we've got to maintain health care for the whole of the SDHB area. So it is unrealistic to think, and you just can't do a project of that size and scope too quickly, because there's too much at stake. We've got to maintain health services on the way through. We've got to make sure that we've got what we are building is fit for purpose now and on into the next 50 years. Now, I don't think we should be under any illusion that we've got a few years of disruption in terms of health services. It's a bit like travelling through Christchurch. It's orange road cones everywhere, and I think we're going to have to accept that our health service out of Dunedin Hospital is going to be like that, because that's what a rebuild takes. But it's not something equally that we need to put an end date on just because it sounds good. We've got to do it properly.
So Labor has said that they will start the rebuild within their first term in government. How is National's proposition preferable to this?
Well, arguably we've started the process because we've started the rebuild because we have been planning for it, and the reason that the Prime Minister came down, I beg your pardon, Minister of Finance came down and he and the Prime Minister made the announcement was because the business case had been worked through to the point where they could announce with every confidence that, yep, we are now ready to go. So when the first, road cone perhaps, or the first orange cone goes up, you could say that's the start. I'd argue we started a long time ago because we've got to get this project right. A lot depends on it for Dunedin, but a lot depends on it for my constituents as well. And I'm determined that we are going to get good healthcare out of this.
Thank you for that. So this show is predominantly viewed by students. So we're wondering if in 2 minutes or less, if you could tell us why we as young people should vote for National this election.
Oh, because you are the future New Zealanders who are going to innovate and lead us into that new world of being globally looking out into the world, saying we are a small, innovative country. You will use your skills, whether it's in politics, whether it's in IT, whether it's in medicine, and you will be the ones who lead the innovation, absolutely take advantage of the IT possibilities, and you will travel the world, reach out to the world, and you will come back to New Zealand and you will make a contribution when you come back again. National is the party which is promoting a globally outward-looking, confident country. And you should be part of that, and I'd argue that you already are.
So, we like to conclude each of our interviews with a series of quick-fire questions to find out a little bit more about you and just to have a little bit fun. So, are you ready, Jacqui?
Oh, can I just say that I am deathly afraid of this section, particularly the last question. So if I break into a sweat or into a run, it's because it's been too much for me.
Okay.
So, right, seatbelt on, let's do it.
We'll start easy. So what's your favourite thing about living in Otago?
Oh, penguins. Little blue penguins. Because they smell bad, okay? But they are really, really cute. They have transformed the local economy, not of Oamaru, but of the East Coast and of the Otago Peninsula. We should treasure them.
Where's the best place to go and see little blue penguins?
Penguin colony in Oamaru, obviously. But you can do it anywhere, can't you? We need to also make sure that we do protect their habitats, and we do protect them as a species as well, because they are special and they're very precious to us.
Okay, so do you think personality politics is becoming too prevalent in New Zealand?
Oh, I love politics. Personality politics is part of it, but what has got to sit underneath that are people who have the courage of their convictions, that stand for something, and who are prepared to work to achieve what they want to achieve.
Okay, so being from Oamaru, if you had to dress up in steampunk or Victorian heritage dress, what would you choose? And why?
It's a big fat neither. And do you know why? Do you know why? It's because I am a woman in politics, and I have no appetite to dress in a time where women belonged in the kitchen, because I don't belong in the kitchen. And one of the strongest things I do when I'm not working as an MP is I support women and young women. I support students coming into. I have interns in Wellington, and I support young women into careers that maybe they haven't thought about. And I'm not prepared to go back and put a long frock on and an apron. Just not going to do it.
Great point. Okay, so what's your favourite place in your electorate to go and sit down and have a coffee and something to eat?
That was the question. See, that is the question, because how can I choose between all my children? Okay? So there is great coffee all around my region. So I have a bit of a beat, okay? I leave my home and I either go up the Waitaki Valley or I go down State Highway 1, south or north, depending on which part of the electorate I'm going to. After about 55 minutes, I need a coffee. So I'll either stop in Palmerston or Omarama or Geraldine. Please don't ask me to choose.
That's awesome. So this leads to our last question, and it relates to the leaders' debate of last night. So can you please translate to us what Bill English meant when he said cannibaloid in the debate last night?
I bet you couldn't say that 3 times really quickly.
I really couldn't.
And I really couldn't either. I think what the Prime Minister was trying to say was that we have every concern for people who are in extreme pain. Well, of course we do. We've got to be sure, though, that when Pharmac releases medication, that they are doing it for the right reasons. And I absolutely hold to that. It's a tricky one though, isn't it? And next time, if we're sitting here in 3 years' time, I bet the conversation will have moved on, and so it should. And that's one of the great things about politics in New Zealand. We're all so privileged that we can have these really curly conversations about, what's your view on cannabis? Well, my recreational view is, forget it, no way, not happening. Medicinal cannabis, okay, we need to have a really good look at this.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that, Jacqui. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But do join us next week for more insights into the political issues that matter. In the meantime, like our Vote 17 Facebook page and send through any questions that you want answered. Or join us next week in the live audience, Fridays at 1 p.m. See you then.
Thank you for having us.